The Tang dynasty is called Great Tang because of this simple yet powerful spiritual strength. Ning Que is not a typical Tang person. On the battlefield, he often appears lacking in bravery, unlike those fierce warriors who place life and death aside and are willing to sacrifice themselves for the cause. If he had lived in Viking for 20 years, perhaps he would never have written a legendary story of rising from a beggar to a general. However, he had stayed in the army long enough to keenly capture the unique spirit of the Tang people in this era. This allowed him to quickly deduce some worrying facts when he noticed the arrow marks on the princess's convoy. The new Khan of the steppe actually dared to chase and try to kill a Tang princess. If he was not insane, there must be a high-ranking figure within the empire colluding with him, promising not to pursue or retaliate against his actions. The fourth princess has entered the empire's borders and is stationed in Viking, yet she still hasn't fully revealed her identity. Why? Because in her heart, the word trust no longer exists. She may still trust the emperor, but she does not trust His Majesty's ministers. She does not trust you, general, and she does not trust us, the border soldiers. She does not even trust the entire court. She knows very well that without the approval of certain powerful figures in Chang'an, the barbarians on the steppe would never dare to lay a hand on her. The ones who could make such a promise and convince the new Khan are no more than 4 people, and those for our characters she can't afford to provoke. Ning Que said softly, a hint of worrying in his eyes. This power struggle at the upper levels of the empire, even you, general, can only avoid it from a distance. How much more so for someone like me, a commoner? He paused, gently grinding the moist earth with the heel of his boot, before continuing, the situation on the road won't be simple. Someone like me can handle only a few small figures at most, and I'm of no use in this storm. If I'm in the princess's convoy, adding one more person is just another corpse on the mountain path. If I'm not there, Viking will at least have one more obedient and disciplined soldier, Ning Que said in a low voice, with a tone tinged with helplessness. General, just consider me as a wisp of spiritual energy in this world of no real use and not needing special attention. Ma Shixiang looked at the seemingly humble young man before him, rubbed his forehead, and muttered, comparing yourself to the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth. Is that humility or self-praise? If you really want me to revoke my order, perhaps calling yourself just a fart would be more fitting. Ning Que chuckled lightly twice, responding with a hint of playfulness. Since I'm about to become a student at the academy, I should naturally speak in a more refined manner. Ma Shixiang did not continue teasing the young man, but fell silent for a moment. With a furrowed brow, he began to explain, the reason I asked you to be the guide for the princess's convoy. Actually, it's related to your plans for the academy. Your military achievements are sufficient, and you passed the preliminary test. I've already written a recommendation letter to my superiors, and the military's acknowledgement has arrived. But do you think that's enough to smoothly enter the academy? The general's expression became serious, and his tone grew more stern. You've been stationed in Viking all these years, and although you've heard some rumors about the academy, you don't truly understand what kind of place it is. He paused, his gaze intensifying. In our Tang dynasty, the academy is the most sacred and inviolable institution. Getting the military's acknowledgement only means you're eligible to take the entrance exam, but to actually step through the academy's doors, you'll need to visit 3 departments and get their seals. A recommendation letter from a general like me means nothing to those departments. Even the military's acknowledgement carries little weight. If they want, they can delay your entrance exam for years. In recent years, this has become the norm. Aside from students directly recruited by the academy's teachers, any candidates recommended by the court need to spend vast sums of money to grease the wheels. For the sake of that one exam, how many wealthy families have been ruined? I know you've saved up some money these past 2 years in Viking, but do you really think a few hundred taels will be enough to grease the wheels with those people? Ma Shixiang looked at him with a hint of mockery. Ning Que scratched his head and sighed. No one ever told me any of this before. Because now that there's a way to solve it, there's no need to tell you in advance, Ma Shixiang replied in a low voice. He paused for a moment, before his tone grew stricter. As long as you make a contribution on the road and gain the favor of the influential person Hell, even if that person just remembers your name, then any lowly bureaucrat in the princess's court can step forward, and no official would dare extort you. Ning Que stroked his chin, seemingly deep in thought, then said, So, according to you, I'm supposed to risk my life just for a chance to get into the academy. It sounds like it's not really worth it. Ma Shixiang suddenly shot him a sharp look, his voice angry as he scolded, Nonsense. Foolish. To get into the academy, there are countless people who would sell their mothers and even kill their fathers. And now, you're only being asked to take a small risk, and yet you refuse to do it. After a moment of silence, the general calmed himself, his tone softening slightly. I've analyzed it. The princess must know her whereabouts can no longer be kept a secret. You figured out who she is, the people in Viking can guess, and the enemies in the empire have already figured it out. Since she's still going forward with the journey as planned, it means reinforcements are waiting for her ahead. All you need to do is guide her along that shortcut through the mountains and meet up with those people as quickly as possible. How is that a gamble with your life? Ning Que lowered his head in silence, weighing the pros and cons in his mind, as if carefully considering every possible choice hidden within the general's words. Ma Shixiang watched the thoughtful expression on his face and remembered the boy's infuriating temper. He knew that unless he offered something tangible, it would be difficult to get him to take the risk. Sighing deeply, he lowered his voice and said slowly, There's an old man in the princess's party. His surname is La. I hear he practices the south gate of the He-Ocean Tao. At these words, Ning Que suddenly looked up, his normally lazy eyes now gleaming with a sharp, bright light. Ma Shixiang watched him and shook his head with a hint of melancholy. You remember when you were a kid, don't you? When you first arrived in Viking, though you were just a little brat, you charmed everyone with your sweet words and clever tricks. The camp changed several times, and even the meat pie shop in East City had new owners, but you were always that spoiled little brat in Viking who was the most loved. He ruffled Ning Ques's hair, his gaze filled with a mix of helplessness and affection. That year, before the previous general passed away, he got you into the military registry. Then, when we went to the grasslands to collect firewood, we almost got surrounded by the barbarians, but you led everyone to escape. At that time, the whole of Viking decided to reward you properly. They even said that if your request was for the best courtesan in the capital, we'd pool our money and make it happen beautifully. The general, whose hair had already turned gray, shifted his tone, now tinged with a bit of bitterness. I never thought you'd choose to follow the path of that esoteric school. It's truly frustrating. In all of Viking, even in the entire Qishangjai, there isn't a suitable teacher to guide you. We've had to watch helplessly as you flip through that Tai Shinganing Pian until it's falling apart, yet still make no progress. He paused for a moment, his gaze suddenly sharpening. But now, the opportunity has arrived. Ma Shixiang's eyes grew more determined, his tone more serious. Whether it's the academy or that old man named La, you must seize this opportunity. You must hold on to it. Ning Que remained silent for a long time, then sighed softly and spoke slowly. Actually, there's still a part of me that's reluctant. Outside the window, the starlight was like water, quiet and cold. Ma Shixiang looked at the boy, a flash of complexity in his eyes. Weicheng ... is too small in the end. You should go to the capital, Chang'an, and see the real big world. Though those places might be filled with fierce dragons and ferocious tigers, you, a young calf just starting out, what do you have to fear? He paused again, his tone softening. At least there, you won't be stuck with the worn-out Tai Shinganing Pian. To the south of Viking, there was a small water ditch that barely qualified as a stream. Beside the ditch stood a small dirt mound, and at the base of the mound was a simple thatched cottage. The house was so small it could hardly be called a yard, just a patch of fenced land and a stone slab. At night, the rain clouds had long dispersed, and the starry sky was especially bright, with silver light cascading down on the ditch, the dirt mound, and the cottage, casting a beautiful silvery halo over everything. Ning Que, wearing slippers, walked slowly under the starlight. His gaze unconsciously lingered on the cottage, where he had spent many moments with Sang Sang. His steps slowed without thinking, but he knew that as long as he kept walking, no matter how slowly, he would eventually reach his goal. He pushed open the fence gate, quietly walked to where the light from the oil lamp shone through the door crack, and coughed lightly, then softly said, "How about going to the capital?" The door of the cottage creaked open just as his words fell, the sound breaking the quiet of the night. Sang Sang, the young maid, crouched at the door, her small figure cast long in the oil lamp's light. She lightly pressed her fingertips against the edge of the wooden door and looked up to answer, "Didn't you always say you wanted to go to Chang'an? By the way, Ning Que, when are you going to the firearms camp to get some oil? This door has been squeaking for months now. It's so annoying. Who still uses those complicated firearms now? If you just need some oil, I'll go to the logistics camp tomorrow and ask ... double quotes. Ning Que responded absent-mindedly, then suddenly realized he seemed to have gone off track. Wait, that's not what I meant. If we're really leaving, what's the point of worrying about this broken door? Sang Sang stood up, supporting her knees. The cool spring night breeze brushed against her thin body, making her appear even more frail. She looked at Ning Que with a serious and calm tone, without any unnecessary emotion, and softly said, "Even if we leave, someone will still live here. They will still open the door." Ning Que stood silently, his thoughts drifting. The sudden surge of emotion that welled up inside him caught him by surprise. Could it be that someone would really want to stay in this humble, remote, and run-down cottage? He couldn't help but sigh and gently step aside, squeezing past Sang Sang, then softly said, "Pack up your things tonight." Sang Sang slightly adjusted the hair at her temples and looked at Ning Que's back. She asked in a soft voice, "Ning Que, I've never understood. Why are you so interested in that matter?" "No one can resist the temptation of becoming stronger," Ning Que said casually, "and those things, to me, are just too interesting." Ning Que looked at Sang Sang's dark little face, knowing that she had already seen through his thoughts. He raised an eyebrow and said softly, "Besides, the two of us can't stay in Viking forever. The world is so big, and apart from the Empire, there are many other countries waiting for us to explore. Even on a smaller scale, going to Chang'an is better than staying in Viking, whether it's for making more money or getting promoted. So, this time, I must get into the academy." A thoughtful expression appeared on Sang Sang's face. Being still young, her brows and eyes hadn't fully matured, and due to living in the border city with its wind and sand for so long, her face appeared dark and somewhat rough. In addition, due to malnutrition in her childhood, her hair was slightly yellow and sparse, making her far from beautiful, and even shy of being called delicate. She had a pair of long, slender eyes, shaped like willow leaves, with pupils as bright as ice carvings, clear and deep. There was no fluctuation of emotion in her gaze, calm as if she had seen through everything. Though she was only in her early teens, and her face appeared somewhat rough from living in the border city, those eyes gave her an air of maturity beyond her years.